Namaste. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Anam Cara's weekly meditation program. So glad you're able to join us. And I see that we have, again, people from as far away as Australia and parts of the United States, as well as friends and neighbors in the area. So, my privilege, my honor to welcome you all with all my heart to our weekly meditation program, and especially at a time when we really need it. So we're going to be beginning in a moment with the opening mantras. And again, if you know the mantras, you're welcome to chant along. If you've downloaded the sheet from the Anam Cara meditation website and the meditation page has those there, you're welcome to chant along at home. But again, remembering that the essence, the power of mantra, all mantra, is in the consciousness itself. Mantra is a throb, a vibration of the infinite that takes literally the sound form. So in the great shastras, the text on mantra yoga and the scriptures on it, will talk about mantra as literally the sound form of the divine. So to keep that in mind, because the ordinary mind makes things ordinary. So we have to pierce that and remember what's the truth? What's the highest truth of ourself? What's the highest truth of what these practices are that we're doing? So we're going to start with these opening mantras. And again, you're welcome to join along. So namaste. Welcome once again. With all my heart, so good to be in your loving company and to be able to bring that throb of love and compassion and most of all community as a part of that to people around the world that this Sangha embraces. So Thank you for lending the power of your love and your practices to this time, this moment, this satsang this evening. So many things going on, and so many challenging things for so many people. And that's not an abstraction. That's touched our lives here as well. We have family members and dear friends who've been afflicted with this virus. In fact, my father-in-law died yesterday morning after a long respiratory illness. I'm not sure what that was, but he passed away yesterday. And there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people suffering with this and dying from this right now, of all ages. And so it's a particular time, when I think of Dharma, it's a particular time to draw on the power of the practices. You know, Dharma is fundamentally, how do we practice, and then how do we live those practices into the world? And so at a time when so many challenging things are going on for us individually, for humanity, for all beings on this planet, practice, practice, practice. And so really that's what I'm focusing on this evening, is the power of practice. And in particular, you know, we start with, well, how do we even begin to calm the body? And so the yogis really explored this, researched this thousands of years ago. And modern research has confirmed it, that one of the most potent ways of doing that is to really change how we're breathing. That a fundamental physiological process like breathing winds up affecting the whole body, as well as, you know, the research shows there are cascades of information from the heart and the lungs that are affected by breathing that goes up to the brain and helps to calm the fight, flight, freeze, the stress response, just by calming and slowing the breath. And when you combine that with a practice of mantra, you get all that much more potency, power behind the practice. So right now what I want to do is a simple practice, and it makes use of a mantra, Hum Sa. And that mantra is written, if you've got your chat box open on the side, the Hum Sa mantra is written there if you're not familiar with it. But it's very simple, 2 syllables, Hum and Sa. And it's a Sanskrit mantra, and it literally means I am that, I am that. But it's an invocation of who and what we are beyond the mind. It's not the mind's identification, I'm this man, I'm this woman, I'm upset, I'm angry, I'm happy, I'm sad, all those things. This is the boundless I am. This is the infinite awareness of I am that we're helping to invoke, that we want to help the mind bridge into, so that it can be informed by that dimension of our own being that is free from all the travails of everyday life, so that we can be empowered to then live from a place of compassion, patience, kindness, and bring that into the world. So Hum Sa, it said that the breath comes in with the sound hum and goes out with the sound sa. In fact, the mantra shastras will talk about it as what's called the ajapa japa. It means it's the repetition, japa, that does itself, that every breath is always coming in with the sound hum and going out with the sound sa. And we can just attune ourselves to that. Just listen for the hum on the inhalation, the sa on the exhalation, the hum on the inhalation, the sa on the exhalation. And so to help with that, I'm going to just use 2 chords on the harmonium for the inhalation and the exhalation. And so what we're going to do is a few minutes of just this slower, deeper breathing to just help the body begin to calm, and also help the mind, the brain, begin to calm, to be a little bit more detached, a little bit more steady, to be able to dial in to all that we are beyond those agitations in the mind. So here we go. So it's inhalation, exhalation. Sa. You're doing it silently in your mind. Sa. Inhaling, exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling. Very slow and smooth. Inhaling, exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling. Inhaling, exhaling. Hum and the sa. Every breath is affirming the simple awareness, the bare awareness of I am that. I am that means all, everything, nothing left out. I am that. That's the awareness of pure being. You can call it Shiva consciousness, you can call it Buddha mind, call it anything, but it's beyond words, beyond description. But by being informed by that, by coming back to rest in that, moment by moment, here and there throughout the day, that's what it means to take refuge in the practices and then have the mind attuned to them so that after a while they begin to spontaneously arise when we need them to, without even having to think, oh, I better do a practice now. You become so immersed in it, the practice is sustaining you below that level of the ordinary mind. This was really struck me one time. This was decades ago. And we were living in Philadelphia. I was helping to run the Philadelphia ashram at the time. And unfortunately, I had a health issue, and I was had an emergency hospitalization because of kidney stones, and very painful. And as it was happening, I began to hear mantras arising inside, in my awareness. And I began to hear this almost like a celestial choir chanting. And so it helped me to be able to cope with it. But then as I got to into the ER, and then they took me in to begin a treatment, something went wrong. And they thought I was going into anaphylactic shock. I became paralyzed. I was having difficulty breathing. I couldn't speak at all. And yet at the same time, this exquisite chant was going on. It just continued. And all I could hear was the mantra. And I wanted to pour the nurse, you know, they're calling a code and stat this and stat that. And I was trying to keep my eyes open. I kept fading away into the mantra, into that divine presence. And I wanted to reassure the nurse and the doctors, I'm okay, I'm okay. I don't know what's going on physically, but I'm okay. And finally, I closed my eyes and just disappeared into that. And after some time, 2 hours, 3 hours later, I awoke in a recovery room, and they told me what had happened, and I tried to tell them what had happened. But to me, this is the power of the practice. This is the power of mantra. You know, so mantra is not like any other ordinary language, ordinary words, ordinary sounds. The power of mantra lies in the fact that it really is a throb of the infinite. When we say take refuge in the mantra, you're taking refuge in the divine presence. You're taking refuge in the power, the presence of the infinite to embrace us. It doesn't necessarily mean that the body is suddenly free of whatever it's going to go through. I actually had more kidney stone attacks, so I know it didn't heal that. But it took me to a place beyond any suffering, any pain. So coming back to taking refuge in the mantra over and over and over throughout the day, this is one of the most powerful means that we're given to be able to move through everyday life with all its ups and downs, and especially at a time like this, where we need, where our heart, our soul, our mind is clamoring for a refuge. We can find it in meditative practice and in the power of mantra. That's what then gives us access to the compassion, the love, the kindness, the wisdom, the equanimity, to move into the world and move through it and be of service. That's what we were talking about last week when we were talking about the mantra of the Heart Sutra, that its whole purpose and power is to help calm the mind so that we get free of all the things we so automatically identify with. And the mind identifies with every thought, every feeling, every agitation, every fear, every projection of the fear, every remembrance of something that was all. That's what the mind does. To free it, to start to cut through that habit, that compulsion of the mind to identify with everything that is mere content, and to discover the boundlessness, the spaciousness, the infinitude of being. That's our heart. That's the heart of the divine. That's the heart of you. That's the heart of practice, is coming to know that and live through that. Live it into the world. So we may just discover for moments here and there on a meditation seat or on a walk or out in nature or with a loved one. But the practices empower us to become more and more steady. They talk about steady wisdom, so that knowing, that pure knowing of that all this, that everyone is the divine, that this is all the unfolding of the divine, which the mind can't accept. The mind goes, no, the divine is just supposed to be the good stuff. No, that's not how it is. The infinite creates the infinite. That's the opening mantras. Om Purnamada, Purnamidam. Out of the infinite comes the infinite, and the infinite remains. Out of the infinite comes the infinite flow of thoughts, feelings, all the events of life. And yet that infinitude of being that holds it all in a loving embrace that can empower us to have steady wisdom in the face of these things. That's what practices support us in doing. And that's why in all traditions, Buddhist traditions, yogic traditions, Hindu traditions, Christian traditions, Kabbalah traditions, Sufi traditions, taking refuge in the name, taking refuge and doing the practices that bring us there is what begins to change the composition of the mind. It's often likened to when you dip a cloth in dye. It might start out pure white, and then you dip it in the dye and it turns pink. And then you dip it in dye, now it gets a little darker pink. And then finally it becomes red, like the color of the dye. We have to dip the mind over and over again into the infinite expanse, the ocean of the divine, so that it becomes permeated with that. So that as we encounter these things, that wisdom arises. We're used to the mind thinking it has to do everything, that its job is to do this. And certainly for a long time, that's what we're doing when we're cultivating the practices. There's that level of engagement of the mind doing. And that's why it's called right action, right practice, right effort. But there comes a time when now that flow is spontaneously arising, spontaneously embracing, spontaneously moving us beyond the suffering and the pain that we can experience. So we stay with the practice, we cultivate the practices in order to have that spontaneous unfolding moment by moment, day by day. The power behind that, of course, in the yogic tradition is known as Kundalini. Kundalini is the power of the infinite for revelation and transformation. It's an innate power to every single human being. And whether we call it that from the yogic tradition, or we call it Shekinah and the Jewish tradition, or we call it Buddha mind in that tradition, it doesn't matter the name. It's that living throb of awareness, of consciousness that is always free, always unbounded. That's why Buddha talked about the four immeasurables: the boundless love, the boundless compassion, right? The boundless equanimity, the boundless wisdom. Those aren't mind generated, right? We're so used to the mind thinking it has to do everything. It can't generate infinitude. It can't generate boundless love. It generates some love and kindness. It's conditional, and it often gets perturbed or gets lost. But it's practices. That's all good. That cultivates the patterns that we need so that as that's arising more from just the source of our being, it has a place to flow through into this world. So the practices are that kind of transformation that's relying on really the root power that's inherent in the practices. And the root power inherent in mantra is Shakti Kundalini. All mantras arise from that power. And that's why it has the power to dissolve the mind, because that same power is the source of mind. Right? The mind is mantra. In the Shiva Sutras, it says the mind is mantra. What does that mean? Well, it means it's arising from the same place. But now it's arising with a limited eye awareness, the limited consciousness of identification with the body, with the mind, with the roles that we play as husband and wife, son, daughter, etc. That's limited eye awareness. The profound I am that boundless awareness that's in mantra, that's the root of all mantra, that's the awareness of the infinite. And so just as we've spent lifetimes exploring what it is to know the finite, to know what it is to inhabit one form after another, even in the course of one lifetime, we inhabit different roles, different relationships, different jobs, different identifications we put on. Think of the different identifications we put on when we put on certain clothes or take off certain clothes and shed them. And that's why it's often used as a metaphor in the Shaivite tradition of, we have to shed the clothes, the malas that bind and limit our consciousness, so that what's innate, what's under that, the boundless freedom of awareness, then we have access to that. So in these times, as challenging and difficult as they are, to remember that for the infinite, it's all being held in that loving embrace. So if we can come home to that, we can start to feel that, and then be able to come into, the everyday world empowered. Not empowered like, I can do anything. No, empowered with wisdom, empowered with love, empowered with compassion. That's what we need to bring into this world, and have our actions and taking actions to reflect that. So over and over again, taking refuge, the highest dharma, in a sense, is to really imbibe and live the practices, to do the practices. The little practices, as well as, I'm going to sit for a bit. What's the mind doing the rest of the day? Because if we can keep it coming back to the hum and the sa, if we keep coming back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, with the awareness of I am Shiva, the auspicious one, I am the infinite, then that begins to really transform the mind and the body. Or Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Om Kalima. Invoking the great mother who embraces all, uplifts all, removes the obstacles. Om Kalima, Om Kalima. So bring the mind back to the power of mantra, because mantra is then able to dissolve the mind and bring us back not only to our source, that source is actually the same source as mantra, the divine within. So as we become more and more absorbed in meditation and mantra, the mantra begins to shed its form, so that then what's there is just the stillness, just the spaciousness of being, nothing left out. But it's in that stillness, in that silence, that true wisdom is known. What the mind knows, that's not the depths of wisdom. The depths of wisdom unfold in silence, in stillness. So we go there. Along the way, we get whiffs of that wisdom. We get whiffs of that inspiration. So even if we haven't become absolutely still or silent in meditation, we can feel the energy. We can feel the upliftment. that comes with just having really attuned ourselves. You know? Mantra is like a tuning fork, and it helps to attune the mind to what its source is and what lies beyond the mind. So taking refuge in mantra over and over and over again, whether it's through practices of chanting, meditation, chanting out loud, chanting in the mind, all of these are ways that we can really become immersed in it. But one of the critical dimensions of it is to do it with the awareness of I am that, the Hamsa awareness. Because it's not the mantra is a separate thing from you and it's separate from God or the divine. These are all just one. You, the infinite, the mantra, one throb, one pulsation. It's all there is. So when we take refuge in the mantra, we also want to cultivate that understanding. Because the mind divides things up and separates them. That's its job. That's the dharma of the mind. It's an instrument for being divisive, for separating things out. To know the finite means to know the particulars. To know the particulars means to know this is different from that. That is what the mind affords us. But to know the infinite, to know the unity, to know the one that has become the many, then we have to let the mind dissolve. It'll come back again, but now we come back to it with some distance. So we're going to take refuge in the mantra. We're going to be chanting the mantra Om Namah Shivaya for a few minutes. And then we're just going to sit in that stillness. If the mind moves, just allow it to keep coming back to Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, with the awareness of I am that. I am the boundless one. I am the infinite. All day long we've practiced the little mantras. It's called Matrika Shaktis, the little power of words that creates our finite experience, identifying with limitations. In meditation, we get to just drop it. I am the infinite. I'm the boundless one. That's who you are. That's who you've always been. You've never been anything else. So you can put on cloaks, you can put on coverings, you can pretend to be this or that. But your exquisite, sublime, infinite nature has never been sullied. It has never disappeared. It's always present. And mantra is a way of attuning to that once again. So we'll chant Om Namah Shivaya. You can chant at home, and then we'll just sit in the stillness. At the end of the meditation, I'll ring a gong. We'll chant for a few rounds, close up the program, and then we'll again try opening the video and the mics for everybody. So we're going to begin now chanting Om Namah Shivaya. So we end with this prayer. May all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. So we focused on using mantra as the refuge, for how to take refuge in our highest being and the divine. But taking refuge in other practices too. The practice of seva, of selflessly serving others. And if we're isolated in our homes, then we selflessly serve each other. If we can reach out through the internet and serve some others, that too is a refuge that takes us out of the ordinary mind and says, no, how do I bring loving kindness, patience, compassion, wisdom? How do I bring that into the moment? How do I bring that into the world? That's what our Dharma is to keep walking that wisdom, walking that knowing into the world through all our different means. So I want to thank you all again from the bottom of my heart, and thank you on the behalf of our whole Sangha, because I know many of you, and I know the loving hearts that you have that reach out to embrace everybody in the Sangha and everybody beyond that, all beings in the world. So with all that greatness, all that love, we can transform this moment in the moments to come and what's going to unfold for us. So keep coming back to love. That's what informs all practices. And I love you. I love you all, and I thank you for coming. So namaste.